After making history by passing the largest tax overhaul in decades, Republicans are hoping legislative lightning will strike twice in 2018. But if 2017 taught us anything, it's that you shouldn't count your policy victories before they hatch, especially in a midterm election year. Earlier this week, President Donald Trump predicted that Congress will soon take another run at health care, tweeting that after the successful repeal of the individual mandate, which he says essentially repeals Obamacare, quote, Democrats and Republicans will eventually come together and develop a great new health care plan. And that's not the only area where Trump is optimistic. Here he is at the end of last week, looking toward the year ahead.
Infrastructure is by far the easiest. People want it, Republicans and Democrats. We're going to have tremendous Democrat support on infrastructure, as you know.
A few blocks down on Pennsylvania Avenue, House Speaker Paul Ryan looked to be on a slightly different page.
Will Congress take up entitlement spending next year?
We have to address entitlements. Otherwise, we can't really get our handle on our future debt.
Ryan says welfare reform will also be on the table for next year, but with the GOP holding a slim majority in the Senate, Mitch McConnell has pretty much called both ideas a political no-go. So who has the best plan of attack for 2018? Who better to ask than three of my favorite Massachusetts Republicans, Weymouth Mayor Robert Hedlund, Michael Graham, a Boston Herald columnist and host of Michael in the Morning, and Michael Astrew, former Social Security Commissioner under both the Bush and Obama administrations. Thank you all for coming in on this balmy winter afternoon. Can
I just point out that we now have a quorum for the entire Massachusetts Republican Party in this room right now?
Historic.
So don't vote for anything.
I don't think any of you were fist-pumping when Donald Trump became the Republican nominee. Tell me if I'm wrong about that. But if that is, in fact, the case...
When he became the nominee.
When he became the nominee.
Correct.
Looking back on his first year, how would you grade him? Let's start with you, and I know it's hackneyed, but give him a letter grade for 2017.
Grades are one thing. What's the part of the report card when they talk about a disruptive influence?
Right.
Kids, it's a disruptive influence in class. Obviously, on policy stuff, obviously there's a victory with the tax reform package, but some of the behavior and the antics leave me a little bit puzzled.
So are you going to go for a B with a low participation grade
Something
there?
like that. Yeah.
Okay. How about
I'm not sure how we do grades in school anymore, by the way, too.
I'm grading on the Michael Graham standard, so I give him an A+++++, because I'm just stunned that he's still in office, that there's tumbleweeds aren't rolling through the streets. I mean, you could not, when people say I set the bar for Donald Trump, setting the bar for Donald Trump is a mic drop. I mean, the bar is on the ground. And so on the game of expectations, he's been wildly not as horrifying as I would have feared.
Okay, and do you like the tax overhaul?
I mean, compared to the not had tax overhaul, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you'll take it. Okay, Michael Astrew, how about you?
Well, I'd fail him on deportment, and I'd give him probably an incomplete on the merits. I think it's a little hard to tell so far.
Okay. Given those, I was going to say ungenerous grades, but you were somewhat generous with that big asterisk. Is the president right to expect a blossoming of bipartisanship on health care and infrastructure investment in the year ahead? Or is he maybe being a little bit naive about policy and also politics?
If he's expecting it, he's being naive. I think there's a real dilemma for the Democrats. Even when they can cooperate on the merits, they may decide it's bad politics and not cooperate. But there's clearly some potential there. Infrastructure, as you mentioned, the clip, maybe Dreamers, maybe trade. So there are some areas where you could envision it being possible. But whether it can happen in the dysfunctional Washington that we have, I don't know.
It's a little easier to imagine, right, on infrastructure and the other areas that Michael talked about than it is on health care, at least for me, because he has seemed so dead set on undoing Obamacare, attaching it to the previous president who was a Democrat. Am I right that Democrats are probably not going to flock to be part of a Trump-led solution on health care?
I think in this resist environment, you're right. And, I think Michael referenced this in a great column he had this week where you had a pathway here for some bipartisanship on the tax bill. And Democrats walked away from any attempt at bipartisanship on this just to continue in that resist mode, which is interesting when you consider we had two former Democrat presidents that talked about reforming the corporate tax rate, for instance. So there was an opening here for them to work with Republicans on this bill. They chose not to. And I think that's going to be the same with some of these issues. The one exception, I think, being infrastructure, where you have some Democrats in Rust Belt states or strong union states that can't walk away from that. Maybe have genuine infrastructure needs in those states that can get funded.
I disagree completely. You will see nothing happen. Nothing. You will not get a single Democratic vote. Nothing is going to happen.
Even on infrastructure.
Nothing. I know it's weird. It's this tense dynamic of, on the one hand, politicians love dumping out money, and on the other hand, Democrats, they see their path forward. How do you crush in 2018? It's all about Trump. And any cooperation with Trump undermines their plan for 2018. There will be none. The Republicans have used their one weird trick called reconciliation. They can't do anything without 60 votes in the Senate. Not going to happen.
To be a little contrarian, I think he may surprise you on health care and some other areas. I mean, you can be sure he's going to surprise us on something. But on health care, I think, for instance, importation of drugs from Canada, which has been off limits on a fairly bipartisan basis. A lot of support in the Democrats in Congress. Rand Paul and some of the Republicans, he's talked about it. I think he's going to push to make that happen.
But what about that concern that Michael referenced a moment ago, that if Democrats do anything, it totally subverts the narrative they want to present, the massive resistance narrative that you alluded to a moment ago, heading into the midterms? I mean, isn't that a huge risk for the Dems?
It is, and the question is something like an infrastructure bill. There's so many goodies there. Do they sort of revert to old habits when they can kind of belly up to the trough? I mean, I lived through that exercise in the first year of the Obama administration, and the availability of money for the state or the district can turn around members pretty quickly. So is the president likely? Well, I should let you in here.
I just completely disagree. I mean, the Democratic base is what's going to fix the midterms. Alabama was the model. How do you get minority voters to show up in an off-year election? They traditionally don't. How do you get Democrats to show up? They traditionally don't. They have a path to do it, and anybody who betrays the Democratic team by working with evil Hitler Trump is going to get punished by their base. And there's serious concerns about primaries, and there should be.
I'm really glad you brought up Alabama, because I think, like you, I was reading the piece you just did for CBS News where you argued that Roy Moore was the problem in Alabama, as opposed to the Democratic approach being the advantage that they could repeat moving forward. Do the three of you think that this talk of a coming Democratic wave, them retaking the House, retaking the Senate, is that realistic, or is it maybe the political media and Democrats getting a little overexcited on the basis of a couple non-representative elections?
I think it's the historical trend. It's the reality. It's going to happen. I mean, and it's not necessarily Roy Moore pretending that wave, but the fact that that's what happens in midterms, especially with an unpopular president.
But what about the Senate? I just don't see the Senate on the table just because of the map is so pro-Republican.
Yeah, remind me, how many seats?
I thought it was 52 until before, if I remember correctly, and that we've snatched defeat from the jaws of victory with one. So we don't have to lose very much. And I thought we were pretty safe as recently as 6 months ago. I think it's touch and go in the Senate, and I think we've got a real risk in the House.
Democrats have the chance of losing some seats in North Dakota, Missouri, et cetera. They've got to defend 26. Republicans only have to defend 10. It would be a real bank shot for the Democrats to hold all those seats and pick up Arizona and another state.
And a bunch of those are in states that Trump carried, right?
Exactly.
Where they are going to be
those are the type of states that I think you'll see on infrastructure where I disagree with Michael, where you'll have Democrats vote for an infrastructure package.
Reforming Medicare, reforming Social Security. Paul Ryan obviously would love nothing more. That strikes me, and I'm not a political operative, that strikes me as a pretty dicey proposition heading into a year when people are talking about a Democratic wave. Do you think that that's something that could actually come to pass in 2018 before the elections?
It could, because it happens at the strangest times. I mean, they almost did it in the Clinton administration. They almost did it in the Obama administration, the same Clinton economists that wanted to do it until right before the Lewinsky thing. So it could bubble up at any time, but I don't see it happening on the Senate side. I think Ryan's dying to go after entitlements. I just don't think there's the same enthusiasm in the Senate. So my guess is it's not going to happen, but I don't think you can know for sure.
Let me shift gears to Massachusetts for a little bit. As you all know, Charlie Baker is consistently identified as the most popular governor. I think it's Morning Consult that does this polling. He has incredibly high favorability numbers. The Democratic strategy is clearly going to be, whoever lands the nomination, they're going to try to link him to Donald Trump, say he has not been vigorous enough in his pushback against the president. Are any of you concerned that President Trump might drag down Charlie Baker and make it hard for him to win re-election in a wave year, despite the fact that a lot of people seem to have liked the job he's done?
I think anyone that buys that is in that small percentage of people that don't like Charlie Baker. I can't see that strategy working at all.
The thing about waves is that waves are indiscriminate, and that's why I think it doesn't matter what Charlie Baker does, doesn't matter how he campaigns. If people show up because they want to beat up Trump, he could be a victim of it. Everyone knows he's not a Trump guy. Doesn't matter. Waves don't discriminate.
Right now, there's no shot. I think that where you would worry is if by summer you have impeachment hearings or something like that, and it really is starting to implode in Washington, in which case Michael might be right. It just is indiscriminate and hits everybody. I think the chances of that are pretty low, though. I think we've got pretty smart electorate here. They don't associate Charlie Baker with Donald Trump. The Massachusetts voters are too smart for that.
Anybody who bets on a Republican winning in Massachusetts is doing
we gotta wrap it up.
Post Watergate, the only Republican pickup was a Massachusetts congressional seat Paul Cronin. So it can happen.
We'll leave it with that historical nugget. Bob Hedlund, Michael Graham, Michael Astrew. Thank you all for being here.